I think one of the interesting things about Hall, and one of the things that makes his commitment to Texas and inclusion into the roster notable, is that to me, this doesn't change the direction of the Texas season at all. They have, I think, taken a room that is now a strength and they've made it stronger. But yesterday, and I don't mean this to be the depressing part of the video, and I don't plan to stay on this point too long. But when someone asked me yesterday, what's holding this team back from being 11-1 next year and in the playoff conversation?
Okay. And
I said, other than a completely inexperienced quarterback playing behind an offensive line that you don't really know what to make out of, a defense that lacks a pass rush, which could be, one of the things that gets some help before this thing's all said and done, with a lack of playmakers and a special teams that's a major question mark going into the season. Other than those 6 things, nothing, I guess, is keeping Texas back from 11-1. To me, this signals that Texas is going to try to outscore teams. that their numbers are so tight.
Mm-hmm.
And he says, numbers be damned. Give me another passing game guy that I've got to worry about getting targets to. Leads me to believe that this season, Sarkisian's blueprint for winning and getting into a Big 12 championship game is to score more points than the opponent does. Its skill talent on offense gives them a chance to do that. Now, can the quarterback position climb over the inexperience question mark in a way that allows them to do that? And can the offensive line hold up? I mean, this offense averaged, I think, 36.5 points a year ago, or 35.5. Like, it's not a big step for them to take to get to 40. You're averaging 40 points a game. Yeah. You should win a lot of games.
Mm-hmm.
And I think Sark is building an offense that can do what Texas did to Texas Tech in a number of games to various opponents this year. The question will be, in the toughest games, the 6 toughest games on the schedule, can they out-weapon opponents in a way that masks the issues that it has? I don't know how to answer that question, but you know what? If you're ever going to try that experiment, screw it. We're just going to, it's like a baseball team not caring about defense. They're just putting a slugger at third base and being like, whatever. He may have 10 errors, but he's going to hit 40 home runs. Yeah. This is the football approach to that. It is question marks everywhere, but by God, you won't question our receivers and our running backs and our skill guys in general. A year ago, Texas couldn't really try that approach because they didn't have good enough players. This year, the depth is there, and the evolving growth of so many other players, Marcus Washington, Jatavian Sanders, even a guy like Kane, who is maybe the 7th receiver in this program, is a player that, you'd probably like to see. That guy's had a good enough spring that he deserves some game reps. And we just weren't saying that about 5 guys at the position a year ago. We were counting 1 or 2 guys, and we were like, where the hell is everybody else at? I think they fixed that problem. Mm-hmm. And if nothing else, this team, take the over in every Texas game that's played next season. There may be a good chance that that's the easiest money to make anywhere, because by the time Vegas catches up to what Texas is truly doing on offense, you may have won like 5 or 6 of these in a row before Vegas is like, oh, we need to set that number high, because this is going to be a team, I think, that does average 40 points a game.
Mm-hmm.
If you ask me what I think, what the defense gives up, I don't know. I don't know how to answer that question, which is why it's still really hard to talk about this team in general.
No, I mean, I think that's a really great point. It reminds me of the Oklahoma teams that they've just won with offense, and they didn't have a good defense for years. And they're like, well, we're just going to outscore everybody. And to defense be damned. You score 40, we'll score 50, we'll call it a day. You score 50, we'll score 55, we'll call it a day. Like, it doesn't matter.
The Art Briles way of doing it. Like, this is if your offense is that good in the Big 12, it is established that you can. It doesn't help you in the playoffs. You can get your ass kicked in the playoffs.
Yeah, correct. Yes.
But it can win you the conference and potentially get you in a discussion. It's the first step towards being a playoff team, is to be good enough that you're in contention for a playoff. Nobody ever goes to the playoff like in year one of being in the playoff and like handles, they get slapped around a little bit. Like, oh, this is what it's like to play Alabama in January.
Right. But that's always been my thing. And because I've been like this consistent for years. It's just when people would knock OU for losing in the playoffs, I would say, but they got there. Like, I don't give a damn, that they lost or they got they handed to them. It's just about getting there. It's about establishing that momentum and and getting that thing flowing to the point that you are competing. And so for me, it's always been about just getting out of the Big 12. Like, I'm not worried about CFP stuff and Alabama and Clemson and all that other type of stuff. Find the ways to beat your Baylors of the world, your TCUs of the world, the Oklahoma States of the world. Just get out this damn conference, and you can do that. Who at that point it's like found money if you could have success in a CFP, but you just got to get out. So now all of a sudden, if you're telling me, hey, they're just going to try to outscore OU, outscore Baylor, outscore Oklahoma State, and they're just going to run one track guy after another guy after another. You're going to get Bijan for a couple of series, and you're going to Roshan, and then just when you feel like you can take a breath, you're going to throw Keelan after them. You're going to throw Xavier after them. You're going to throw Hall and Nair and Whittington and anybody else who's healthy there. Throw all these tight ends at them. They're just going to keep throwing and all these guys, just stop them, for 4 quarters, which could be pretty damn hard to do, Catch. I mean, when your bench guys come in and there's not a huge drop off, if that's the goal, Catch, and we're covering 50 to 48 wins. Well, there's going to be some Texas fans that need some road products to kind of calm themselves afterwards. If the end result is the W's, then it definitely works. So it'll be interesting to watch. And but I will have to give them credit for going out and getting Hall. And by the way, Catch, the very last thing I'll say is, I don't know what Sarkisian's recruiting pitch is, but whatever it is pretty damn good.
I think he's using the Alabama pitch. It's look at how many guys we put into the league.
But he used it at USC and got a number 1 class too, Catch.
Yeah. And he was able to do that at USC. I mean, he was able to say, when we were here, it was true while he was at USC, he's a very likable guy, clearly charismatic in the sense that it's hard to find people who spend time around him. Most of them think that, he's a great guy. You know what I mean? Whether it's scouts or coaches or whomever, people like Sarkisian. So it doesn't surprise me that players like him. I think that the problem that he's going to run into is that's what the line that all great assistant coaches use in the beginning. I mean, Kirby Smart did it at Georgia. Charlie Strong did it at Texas, right? Look at the guys I've produced and put into the league, and look at how successful we were at Florida. And even at Louisville, he was producing guys and putting them into the NFL. At some point, you do have to do it your own. But I think right now, likable and a track record of being involved in programs with lots of NFL players is really working. However, one of the things when I did that whole inexperience at quarterback, you don't know about the offensive line. You got a defense that can't rush the passer, doesn't have playmakers. You don't know about the kicking game. And oh, by the way, you have a head coach that's never really had a real successful season as a head coach. I mean, the Washington stuff comes with an asterisk because that program that he inherited was winless. but he never quite got Washington to that level. In the short time at USC, he didn't produce a big season, didn't obviously do it at Texas a year ago. So when we talk about the things that this team has to prove, you have to add the coaching staff, and you have to add Sarkisian specifically as the ringleader of all of this, proving that he can do what he's been able to do as an assistant at other schools. It's one of the reasons why I like the idea of, hey, if the task is score more points than the other team, and we think we're going to give up a lot of points, then we're going to need to score more points. At least there seems to be a plan. That's a plan. I mean, if you go ask Steve Sarkisian on Thursday, Sark, if your defenses doesn't make great improvements, what's your counter to that? And he says, we plan on having a top 5 scoring team in the country. That's our plan. Mm-hmm. And we think if we're that, we're going to be in the mix.
Yeah.
I'll go, okay. Mm-hmm. They're doing the thing that we're talking about. That's the plan. I don't think that was a plan a year ago. I don't know what the plan was a year ago. But that's an actual plan. And you know what? It's probably an astute one. If they're sitting back and that's what they're going for, maybe they understand their personnel better than they'll ever publicly let on. I think one of the questions, last thing I'll say about this, and this has turned into a really interesting conversation because there really are a lot of little tentacles to this conversation. It's very hard in college football, especially in the Big 12. I've never really seen it happen in the Big 12 where you truly have an elite offense paired with an elite defense on the same team. In the Big 12, historically, big-time offenses come with very vulnerable defenses. And there's always been a question of why that happens. I mean, in my head, I've already been thinking about a piece I'll write on this that will include a lot of, looking at Oklahoma stats, for instance, over the years, but even Texas, when Texas was in its heyday, hard to be great on offense and great on defense, in part because every day in practice, the offense is beating the defense. And so the defense has a hard time getting good because it's hard to ask a unit that isn't great in practice to be great in games. It's not how life works. Go fail 5 days out of the week, but on the most important day of the week, produce results that you're not otherwise getting in practice. We're not there yet, right? And we're not talking about a team. Texas isn't running the ball on this defense in practice in a way that is making you think the defense is going to suck, right? I mean, there are alarm bells going off of this is kind of what we said last year about the Texas offensive line. But you watch some of those practice videos that the UT SID people are putting out in the video department, there's a lot of touchdown passes. Mm-hmm. And how good can your secondary be if it's not better than your receiving core? How do they learn to win? Be a good problem for Texas to have that they're actually elite at something, that it's to the detriment of the other thing. Again, those are rich people problems. Yeah. And Texas isn't yet rich. But if we get to the point where we're talking about the Texas offense being 40 plus points per game good, they're in the top 10 nationally. The closer you get to the national championship team in 2005 averaged 50 points a game. And you knew when they stepped on the field, they were almost good for 50 every week. Texas hadn't hit that moment yet, but if they do, they'll probably be playing in the Big 12 championship game. I will make that concession that if they end up being a team that's in the top 5 nationally in scoring, they'll be playing for the Big 12 championship. Yeah. They might be 9-3 and playing for the Big 12 championship, but I think if you're elite at that, if you're elite at scoring points against most of the teams on the Texas schedule, that's good enough to beat.
So let me ask you this. That's a great point. This would be my final thing. And it's kind of off topic for a second, and maybe it's a subject for another video for another day. How Nick Saban doesn't really need a lot of motivation for games, but when he plays against Texas And he knows that now Texas has become kind of the safe haven for his former players to go to, his former coaches to go to. And he's also competing against Texas for Arch Manning. I mean, when we get there to the fall, is he going to be even more motivated, a little bit more annoyed, a little bit more ornery than usual? Because he's going to be like, you know what? This little Texas thing, I'm starting to get annoyed with these guys. They're really starting to tick me off a little bit.
I have an answer for that. It probably is a video on its own, like its own merit, but I'm going to say no, because when you're the GOAT, you find ways to be like at maximum offended and ready for something at all times. And I think the moment Sarkisian takes the Texas job and takes even one of his assistants, I think he personally is maxed out at that point of, okay, when we play you guys in 2022 in your crib, okay. Now, taking Billingsley and the other, does that add to it? I don't know. Like if we do, unless on a 1 to 10 scale, you're telling me, did he go to an 11? At some point, you're just maxed out. And I think Nick Saban,
like it's the whole Jordan thing, right?
Yeah.
Jordan would just create things that wasn't true, just to piss himself off and fire himself off. Like that. But you're saying he's already at a 10, 8 all day just because he's the GOAT?
He has a team that I can assure you this is what's happening right now. It's 10:36 in the morning as we record this. In the Alabama training room right now, there's the national championship game against Georgia being played on every TV, reminding them you weren't good enough. This is what you're in for. And the thing about Alabama is they're usually defending things, right? They get to be chip on the shoulder team this year. We gonna prove that we're not second best. There are levels to this, but that's their level. Their level is he's pushing them every day by what is going to agitate my players. And you know what? When it's Texas week, he probably won't have to say much. Because that SEC thing and like the defensiveness they get and protect the shield, it's kind of hokey, but it's real. Those guys go into game thinking things like, we'll show them they're not ready for the SEC. And then they'll talk shit about it afterwards. Like, that's what they do. We saw an interview in March from Orange Bloods TV where Jordan Whittington said this, and like, they will turn that into a war cry. And yeah, I don't think this adds to their war cry. I think their war cry is maxed at 10, but you know, maybe it's like 10 plus. I don't know. But yeah, the
Saban fire a shot at like SEC media days, like a subtle shade at Texas or Sark at some point. Like he gets asked a question, because you know how Saban is. It'll just sometimes be a subtle shade or sometimes it's just a full-on rant. But I mean, NIL, you know, he complains about that. I mean, again, he's got enough. He's got enough that he wants to be mad at. He might be
Surly Saban this year, right? And maybe he's got something smart to say about everything. You know, it'd be real easy for him to say, you know, the thing about offensive coordinators in my experience is with me, I can pretty much have anybody and I win. So I don't look at any of my assistants as the key to anything I've ever done, because my resume says the program is successful because of me. Nick Saban doesn't say those things, but if he really wanted to, we've said those things. He could certainly say, you know, it's funny how many great assistants come out of our program.
Yeah.
A lot of guys get head coaching jobs when they're assistant coaches here, and we don't decline. I mean, you know, I think that the thing that they typically have to battle 50% of the time at Alabama, and again, we turn this into another video, but they have to warn off against laziness, you know, Where do you find motivation when you've reached the mountaintop? In the rare years where they don't reach the mountaintop and their season ends with a slap in the mouth, the motivation stuff resets itself pretty easily. And weirdly, it's the thing at Texas that is one of the biggest question marks now for Sarkisian is how do you get this team mentally to be as ready as it needs to be? Because that's one of the big question marks about this program is not just scoring the most points, but week in and week out, showing up and being the best version of yourself. Texas has for a decade now gotten itself in trouble. Too many games, not showing the best version of themselves. The team that beats Texas Tech by 35 points loses at home to Kansas. That shouldn't happen because the best version of Texas didn't show up. And I think that we're reaching a point now where Texas is, again, elite skill positions. And that's not loose talk. They're loaded. The second team offense of skill position guys, Hudson Card, Roshan, Keelan, and pick some of these wide receivers, they can go score some points in the Big 12 as a unit. Give them a good offensive line. That unit scores some points now. So I think that, now there will be expectations that 5-7 won't cut it next year or this season or 6-6 or 7-5, because people are going to say, no. You guys did have elite skill position talent. That should have been good for something.
Yeah.
And they're right. Hey, look, leave us your comments. Anwar, any last thing?
No, I was just going to say, you're funny you said it. That was my very last thing is year two, more so than ever, will actually have a little bit more higher expectations for Sarkisian and probably a little bit more pressure. Because to your point, these aren't necessarily guys where you say, okay, you got to develop your freshmen. These guys are older. Like this is an older team with experienced guys, elite skill, and Texas fans, they're starting to get excited again. And they're starting to tell themselves, okay, this can happen. And you're laying an expectation for a 5-star quarterback, Gary Patterson. Like you can just go down the list of things that have been key additions this offseason. It's going to get it. The expectations are definitely going to get if they aren't raised, they are being raised day by day.
No doubt about it. And O'Shawn Mathis, the day that he announces his commitment for Texas later this month, probably the next week or so, does so even more so. Hey, again, a lot of things to talk about. How excited are you about the addition of Agiye Hall? Am I crazy are Anwar and I wrong? Like, is this a guy that you think comes in and catches 50? Is he a guy that comes in and catches 5? Like, are we overcooking the grits to a certain extent? That's what the comment section is for. We hope you've liked this video. We hope you have subscribed to the channel. For Anwar Richardson and myself, hey, we're not wearing the same clothes, same color clothes today. Even though he went dark again, we will talk to you tomorrow for the modcast, the live modcast. At some point tomorrow afternoon, sometime around lunchtime, Sarkisian will meet with the media at 10. So there will be a buffer time that will allow Anwar essentially to do his job. But once he's done doing his job and takes like a 5-minute break, we'll do the job again and do the modcast because that's how we roll. So until then, you guys take care of each other. Be good to each other. We'll talk to you soon. Later.